All right, as we continue talking about headlines, one of the things that oftentimes I think most of you have been through news writing. I know all of you have been through news writing. Most of you were with me, not a couple of you may not have been. But one of the things that oftentimes I make an effort to note is that I don't really want you to write headlines for your stories. That's something that editors do. And while editors do write headlines, I always say, you just put a slug or a slug line on it. Just a name of a story, something like, fire, or, 3 dead, or something, it can be really simple, something that kind of just hits at what it is, Congress acts, or, Congress in session. And so that's sort of, that's what headline writers do. I'm sorry, that's what a writer does. They just give you a slug. Now, with the web, it's maybe become a little less of an issue, but even there it is an issue. And the issue is that, the problem with why you need somebody else to write your headlines, even on a website, is you never know what kind of space and how big you want to play it and other factors about a headline that exist. For example, even on a website, maybe if you want a story really to have a big headline, or you want to have big art with words on it, that's going to change what words you choose to use. And so the only person who can really make that decision is the one who's there actually working with the designers, or is a designer, and, is basically an editor who can lay it out. And part of the reason is you can take, for example, suppose, as an example, the other day there were the terror attacks in France, and they attacked a newspaper, or not a newspaper, they keep calling it a newspaper, a magazine, a satirical magazine called Charlie Hebdo, and and basically these gunmen killed 12 journalists, or they killed 10 journalists and 2 police officers. But the case is that they attacked this newspaper and went in with guns and shot it up. And basically the issue is you now have a story. Well, you could do, you could write, if a writer was writing a story, they might say, terrorist attack, satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo killing 12. That's a great, it gets to the nut of, what's there. It gets to the key ideas, it gets to the meat of the story. It gets to that idea. And so that is the, that is the, that would be a reasonable headline. The problem is a lot of newspapers would choose to make that their lead story. They would want that story to be the top story of the day in the newspaper. And so they are going to want it at the top. Well, depending upon where this has occurred, you may have different ways of doing it. You want it at the top of the page and saying, terrorist attack, satirical magazine, Charlie Hebdo killing 12 is not very big. And if you were to put it across the top of a page of a newspaper, that headline would end up with words that were really small. And it wouldn't stand out to people. Anybody walking by a newsstand wouldn't even notice it. People get it on the front page of their paper and they would go, oh, there's the paper. But if you see this huge headline, it goes, what's that big headline? Or you're walking through the gas station or through a grocery store and you happen to see this huge headline. Suddenly you go, well, what's going on that they have a headline screaming across the top of the page? Something's happened. And so a large headline is part of the marketing of a newspaper, and it's part of just, being able to tell people that this is an important story. And so you would probably go with a headline across the top would be fairly big. Now, when I was working in a newspaper, we usually had a rule that, headlines at the top of the page were supposed to be about an inch, or about 70 points is what we would do them. And just sort of, I have a copy here on my computer. I have an e-subscription to, if I can get this to, okay, so I have an e-subscription here to, I'm going to do it here so I can actually see it, to the newspaper. Here's a headline across the top that, kind of, goes in here and gives you that big headline. And that's probably a little under an inch. Actually, the main headline is the sticking to the plan story that is there. I'm going to go ahead and turn that back around. I hope it was visible. But that one across the top is probably what they would call a soft lead or something like that, where it's not really the main story. The one that's the package, the photos with the story, is really the headline. But the main story is the one that that has the largest headline, and you want to have words that actually fill that space up. And so you don't want to sit there and get in this business of, making the word smaller, or the letter smaller, just to get a headline to fit. You want to write the headline for the space. That is the key. We write headlines for the space. We don't make the headlines fit the space. And so your goal is to take a space, take a size you want to use, and make it fit and make it work. And you have to write and write and write and write and rewrite and think and think until you finally get it. Because sometimes things like that are not easy to do. Now, as far as it goes, you would probably, if you had it as a top story, you'd want something like 12 killed in a terror attack. That would maybe work, or maybe just 12 killed in an attack. Now, the key there is it's not quite as strong as saying like attack or terror attack kills 12. Terror attack kills 12 is better because it's present tense, but the 12 killed in terror attack puts the focus on the number dead, and that could be beneficial in some ways. If you were here and this had happened in Decatur, you might, or not Decatur, I'm in Decatur, but we're in Springfield. If this had happened in Springfield, you might want a headline like, 12 dead, or attacked, or terror, or anything, just a one-word headline that's 6 inches or 5 inches. I mean, just a huge headline that makes, that really screams out something big has happened. But in most newspapers or most magazines, most TV shows, you're going to have a standard size headline. You will be allowed to differentiate from that. If the story's really weak, you can make it a little smaller. If it's really big, you can, of course, go larger. But being a big story is rare. I mean, that's something like we do once in a while, once every 20 years, or once every 5 years, or once every 10 years. If the Cubs ever win a World Series, it will be perfectly acceptable for every newspaper in Illinois to put on the top, Cubs win. They could put that in, 7-inch, whole front page could be Cubs win, and that would maybe be a worthwhile headline at that size because it would be such a rarity and such an unbelievable phenomenon. So that's a little bit of a joke for Cubs fans. Sorry, but anyway, but the key is that you want that to be a bigger story, and so you really have to be the one writing it to know what size you want it, how big you want it, And sometimes you'll write a headline and you'll go, I think it should be bigger. It just doesn't look like it's big enough, or it just looks too big, and and then that requires you to rewrite it and make it work. The other thing is sometimes you'll put a story there on the side of the page where you have a paper, you have the newspaper, and on the side they will put, there'll be a one-column story. Well, if you put something like 12 killed in terror attack, you're going to have the first line say 12 killed, next line say in terror, and then the word attack is going to be there, and it's going to have all this empty space at the end. A one-column headline is actually one of the hardest headlines to write, because you want to keep it to about 3 lines. Some newspapers, a lot of newspapers will go to up to 4 lines. When I worked for the newspaper in Decatur, Illinois, they had a strict rule of no more than 3 ever. But that would be, that was just their rule. But some would go to 4. But it becomes very difficult to find words that will fit, because things like Sangamon, that's a long word. Like Sangamon County is a long word, and to get that into the space, for one column requires it can never go probably above 40 points or 36 points. And so, you want to have other words you can use, like just county, or things that will help you fit in that space. The Chicago Tribune, I love, they'll do stories about, like power and corruption and other things, and they have a term clout, C-L-O-U-T, C-L-O-U-T, clout. As in somebody has clout, they have a position of an inside position, they have clout. And they will use that word in all kinds of stories. Like they'll say, clout goes to college, about how, people with inside connections are able to get their kids into better schools, or clout gets jobs, or clout gets contracts. They always use this word to say, basically insider. And it's a nice word that allows you to make the word bigger without having to say, nepotism allows for, or, the inside politicians. It just is a nice, concise word that they use. And so oftentimes you come up with words like that will help you to fit it into that space. But the key is you don't know. The other thing is, some stories will go on the bottom of the page, and you don't want a story at the bottom of the page to have the same size headline as one at the top of the page. And so that is something you need to keep in mind. Every space is going to be different. Now, I told you previously that back in the day, newspapers would actually have a sort of this U or kidney-shaped copy desk with slots and rims. And back in the day, that what they would do is they would actually have a fairly scientific way of doing this. They would say, I think this is going to be a like a three column story. So I need a 3-column head. I want it to be one deck, which means one level. A deck meaning like 2 decks would mean you go, it's like one where it says like city approves water, comma, sewer increase, something like that. Where it's actually 2 lines. It's city approves water, sewer increase. And this is probably going backwards because never mind. Because I'm actually reading it like I'm reading it instead of how you would be reading. City approves water, sewer increase. That breaks a line and it goes down. That's called 2 decks versus 1 deck would mean city increases or city hikes services or something. City, services hiked by city or something like that. Those are all examples of 1 deck. And so the idea here is 1 or 2 decks. And so you would know, I want 1 deck, 2 decks, I want 32 points, I want 60 points. They would have sizes, and they would know exactly how many letters that they could fit in that kind of space based upon their rules. And so they would say, okay, I need a headline that's 112 spaces long, or one that's, breaks at 40, 40 letter lines. A space is a letter. And so, just like Twitter uses 160 characters or 120 characters or whatever it is, that 140, I forget what exactly it is. But, this would be, you're given so many characters to say it, and you need to use exactly that many characters. You can use a couple shy on one end, but if you start going over on one end, it becomes a problem. And so you would actually have a very clear way of saying how to do it. In the modern age, with computer software, typically, you kind of have an idea how big it is, and you just type it out and see if it fits, and you don't bother to count anything. That counting is just an unnecessary step. And so what happens is, though, but it is because you design it for specific spaces. Now, this also goes, I don't want you to think that I'm only talking about newspapers. I mean, this also goes for, if you're a radio station with a website, you have to do it. If you're a radio station trying to get things down, I mean, learning how to write concisely is important. TV shows oftentimes have graphics and other things they have to fit, based upon the size they want it. Websites, same thing. All of them have to work within requirements and, use headlines to grab attention and just convey the information as quickly and easily as possible.